On this episode of Purposely Curious, we talk about what a former Israeli space security chief stated about our relationship with aliens. We also look into what some other government officials have said publicly in the past about the subject, and also talk about why the US may now have an official space force. Join us as we go out of this world with UFO talk. So get nice and cozy as this episode starts now. Hello, Leonie.
Greetings, Mary. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Actually, better than well. I was out grocery shopping about an hour ago. Mm-hmm. And, it's keeping up with the football game. And USC beat UCLA.
Oh.
So times are good right now.
Yeah. Times are really good.
Sorry for those UCLA fans out there.
There might be some listening. Dun,
I'm sure.
dun.
I'm sure. So what's new with you?
Well, nothing really. Work's been a little bit busy. I've been actually, when COVID hit, I have like this book challenge on Goodreads.
Okay.
Where I told myself I read 18 books last year. And
Nice.
I said, I'm going to read 20 books this year.
Right.
And then COVID hit and I was like, when they shut everything down and it was like, what's happening? And I had just started the podcast and then,
Right.
I was in my head or whatever. Long story short, it took me months to get back into the reading kind of vibe. So I'm finally in that zone of reading books and I'm really enjoying them. So, I've read like 3 in a month,
That's good.
Yeah. So I've decided to kind of do a little like summary of what I read on Instagram. Just, I don't know what's going on with me. I'm going through some kind of change in my head, but I'm not going to meet my 20 books that I gave myself. I have read 11 and I'm starting my 12th today.
Okay.
But I think I'm going to shoot for maybe 25 books next year. We'll see.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's the newest thing is that I feel like I got my reading vibe back because even when I started reading books, some of them were taking me like 2 months to read. Like I just wasn't feeling it for some reason. So I'm excited about that.
That's good.
Yeah. So.
Do you have a favorite genre of book? Like what, like fiction, nonfiction, romance, history? Like what's your favorite type of book to read?
I like historical fiction books because then that allows me to envision the story where it's taking place. I also like romance, like corny ones. I do like some self-help books, but usually they're more geared towards money, finances.
Right.
And then I like memoirs. So.
Oh, interesting.
That's kind of what I read, but it just like the next book is kind of like a love story, like romance. So I went from like 2 historical fiction books to this. So it's a little change.
Right.
So every once in a while I like to change it up a bit, but for sure I love,
Who's the author who wrote The Notebook?
That I don't know.
I
never read it.
Okay, I was going to ask you if you read his books.
No,
I think most of them are movies, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, I've never read it, yeah.
And then there's one, did you ever read The Fault in Our Stars?
No, never have.
That one's pretty good. The movie was, the movie's pretty good, but I enjoyed the book because the author based the book on a true life, like family who lost their daughter to cancer, So obviously it's about teenage coming of age, finding love and experiencing life,
Yeah.
So it's based on a true story. I can't think of the author's name right now, but I enjoyed the book. And I thought the movie was good, and then I went back and read the book, and I'm like, man, this book is solid,
Yeah. No, I haven't read it. And that's the sad part about the book industry. Well, no, I wouldn't even say it's a sad part. There's just so many books.
Right.
So many genres that it's just hard to keep track, like
Yeah.
like there's books that everyone is raving about right now that I will add to my list, and I won't get to that book till like mid next year, kind of, you know what I mean? Because it's just crazy. Yeah. If I could read all of them, I would, but no, it's not feasible.
And how do you read your books?
As in?
Paperback, hard copy, iPad,
Paperback mostly.
Okay.
But sometimes, depending on the book or the availability, I'll get hardcover. But I cannot do electronic reading. My eyes get very tired.
Right.
So yeah, I paperback, just stick to paper, old school. That's just me.
Nice. I have a bad habit of going hardback, hard copy, for when I buy a book, I always look for the hard copy, and when I finish it, I always give the book away, I find that one person that would like this,
Yeah.
and then I'd be like, hey, do you like this? You read, and they're like, yeah. And I'm like, cool, here you go. Have fun,
Yeah. It's funny because one of my best friends, Natalie, had mentioned like borrowing a book from me, or that she should borrow books from me.
Right.
And I was like, I'm saying this in a nice way. I don't mean to be rude, but I don't let anyone borrow my books.
That's funny.
I know. I felt like such a bitch, Natalie, but she knows me. She knows that I meant that nicely.
That's funny. That's hilarious.
Yeah. So anyway, I wanted to start our episode. Well, not that I wanted to. This week, I wanted to talk about UFOs and the Galactic Federation. Dun, dun, dun.
Nice.
So the former Israeli space security chief stated publicly that extraterrestrials exist and that our president, Donald Trump, knows about it. On episode 5 of the Purposely Curious podcast, we did discuss UFOs. Do you remember that, Leonie?
I think I had my memory wiped. Like one night I found myself naked running down the street. I think I was abducted and they like wiped my memory. So no, I don't remember. Can you tell me what happened on that podcast?
Well, we discussed unidentified flying saucers.
Yes.
We touched on the historical data and stories that were told from generation to generation of possible UFO sightings. We also discussed the famous Tic Tac video, which you brought up, and also looked into a little unknown story of the Battle of Los Angeles. Does that remind you of any recording now?
Yes, totally does.
So we released that episode on April 15th of this year. And shortly after that, the Navy and the Pentagon declassified footage of UFOs that had originally been leaked to the public, I believe in 2017, 2018, but they officially released them and declassified them. So on an episode after, when we were doing kind of like our little small talk before our subjects, I joked that it was because of my small podcast that the U.S. Navy and the Pentagon declassified these videos because we had discussed it on the podcast. But I don't know. So our episode came out April 15th and the Pentagon officially declassified them April 28th. So I'm sticking to my story.
Nice.
We also discussed on episode 5 how Tom DeLonge from Blink 182, formerly from Blink 182, is on this episode is where I found out that he and the organization that he founded was behind the original leakage of the videos. So I didn't put 2 and 2 together until you and I were talking and you mentioned it, that I realized that he was behind the leaked videos that the Pentagon officially released and declassified earlier this year.
Right.
Tom DeLonge, with former U.S. military officials and UFO experts, formed the STARS Academy of Arts and Sciences. And so UFOs research is one of his greatest passions. So when this came to light, even Travis Barker tweeted a congratulatory message to Tom when the organization was publicly credited for, getting the Pentagon to release these videos. So, how great is that? Do you think the Blink-182 band members actually now believe him? Do you think they ever believed him, or do you think they were butthurt that he left to follow his UFO passion?
Yeah, there's a lot of weird bad blood that goes beyond all that. It's just, it goes back like 20 years of not getting along and this. So it's way beyond that, But
yeah,
you know what's crazy about Tom DeLonge and the his whole UFO thing is I knew in one news story, I knew that he was legit. You know how that news story came out?
Mm-mm.
So do you remember WikiLeaks?
Yes.
So WikiLeaks, remember they were leaking, Hillary Clinton was doing this and trying to, steal the election, a bunch of like illegal things going on in the government, right? And they leaked it, right? And in that leak, Tom DeLonge's name pops up.
Yeah.
Like people were saying, those things are not real, right? They're just all this made up or conspiracy theories. Why would his name pop up on a UFO story, right? And that's when I realized, I don't care what people think. His name popped up with a bunch of senators and top-ranking like Pentagon officials for the U.S. government. So yes, there's something legit going on. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
He's maybe he hasn't seen things, or maybe he was shown things. I don't know, but he definitely knows things.
Oh yeah, for sure. And he also has a show on the History Channel with members of the Academy.
Yes.
Which I didn't realize until I stumbled upon it earlier this year.
Yeah.
So I may start watching it. But I just thought it was great that Travis Barker tweeted a congratulatory tweet.
Right.
Basically. And being, a fan of Travis Barker, I was like, ooh. Do they find what he's doing now legit? But then I don't know if they always did. But from what I've heard, there was always resentment of him leaving, and not really wanting to be a part of it.
I think
that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, I think half of them get along because, remember, they all form different bands, remember? Mm-hmm. And I can't remember the names of the bands right now.
Yeah, that's fine.
But didn't him and Travis have a band together?
I don't know that. I don't know that.
Was it Boxcar Racer?
I don't know.
It was one of those bands. Like they split ways. Like Tom and oh my God, the other guy, I can't think of his name right now. Like they didn't get along, And then somehow Travis did get along with both of them. And then Boxcar Racer was formed, and then the other band that Tom's in right now, they formed at the same time. Mm-hmm. They were kind of like just doing bands different, separately that were not Blink, then Blink got together, then they split up again. It's just, bizarre, but I don't know what's behind that, but yeah, it's cool that I'm happy for him because it's like, how often is it not some boring guy in a suit, saying, hey, UFOs are real. And it's like, who cares, but then you have somebody out of pop culture icon, right? That we all know. And we were fans of his music, that is telling you, hey, UFOs are real and I have proof, and we're seeking out more proof. So it's like, that to me is way more exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm not going to get into these two, but I know that Miley Cyrus and Demi Lovato, they also have in recent months posted about seeing UFOs. So anyways, but going back to the story that, we discussed on episode 5, I said that in my opinion, Trump was admitting to alien life with the creation of the United States Space Force. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yes. So that was I knew then. I said that this is it. Like, so earlier, I believe this happened maybe a week or 2 weeks ago, but it was only caught fire with Western nations in the last week, is the Israeli head of chief of Israel's space security program. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. It's Haim Eshed.
Yes.
Haim Eshed.
Yes.
So he served as the head of Israel's space security program for, I believe, more than 3 decades. And he had told an Israeli publication that aliens exist, 1, that they live among us, 2, and that they communicate with the United States and also with Israel, which he went into more details as well. Supposedly, as far as what he knows, is that the aliens had signed contracts to where they would do experiments here on Earth with the United States. And I believe they call them the Galactic Federation. Have you heard this story?
No.
It went viral worldwide.
I did catch the headline, and I did read the story, and I thought it was fascinating. And there's a couple of things I picked out of it that were not touched upon, but I was curious to get your thoughts on.
Yeah.
But yeah,
and one more thing.
Yes.
He stated that they live underground on Mars with some of our human astronauts, which to me was like, well, that explains why the private sector is pushing to go to Mars.
To bring them back?
No,
Let's go rescue them.
So, yeah. So, that's just my opinion. I feel like maybe that's why they're pushing, because a lot of these, whether it's SpaceX, right, Boeing,
right,
they all vouch for government contracts.
Right.
Whether it's the U.S. or other countries. So I know there's a space kind of race right now by the private sectors to get those contracts.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you, because I don't know if you know about why we're going back into space, or what, more specifically, why are we going back to the moon?
Why are we?
Yes.
Tell me.
So the moon has been a target for India and China for like the past 20 years, right? They both been saying, we're going to the moon, right? And it's not so much to plant the flag and say, hey, we got to the moon, right? Like, hooray, right? Like we did back in 1969. That's not what the point is. The point of the moon is that the moon has an unlimited source of power. So if you were to bring back, like, let's say, a pickup truck worth of moon rocks back to Earth, and you use a fusion type reactor here on Earth, you can power the world for like 100 years. So it doesn't take much. Now, the power I'm talking about is the moon rocks, the moon dust, right? It's covered in something called helium-3. It's an isotope. So you have deuterium, which is often called heavy water, D2O, and then you have tritium, which is H3. Both of them are radioactive, right? They fuse with the energy of the sun with another neutron, and they form helium-3. So helium-3 is another radioactive isotope, but it actually gives off electricity. So it can be used to power, like think about it. Right now we rely on oil and gas, right? And electrics and all that, and slowly we're converting to solar power and all that, right? Well, this would change everything, because not much of it could power the whole world for like the next 100 years, So the idea of China and India, they want to get there first. And their intentions, maybe not so much India, but definitely China. They want to colonize and be like, this is ours.
Yeah.
And then
the moon's a whole different story.
but we're like,
yeah,
no, it's not. Because back in the 60s, we said, hey, nobody can claim space. And all the countries agreed.
Yeah,
but then all of a sudden,
other country's been to the moon since.
Right.
So, yeah, well, that's...
But all of a sudden, now they want to, you know what I'm saying?
And supposedly our technology is better, but yet they can't make it to the moon.
Well, I think they're going to get there. They're going to get there very quickly. I'm
insinuating something that I'm not going to get into.
But the whole thing is, it's like, okay, Army, Navy, Coast Guard, Marines, right? Space Force.
Yeah.
So there's a whole idea out there that it's like, we might just have to protect something out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it might be the moon, just for starters,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And then Mr. Haim Eshed, am I saying that right?
Yes.
Haim Eshed. When he discussed the Galactic Federation, meaning the aliens, he said that they are in hiding until most humans are ready to accept that this is indeed, that they're here among us, essentially, right?
Right.
But, that might not be surprising for people like you and me, right, who follow this and believe in this, right? He is not the first government official to ever talk about the life here on Earth, UFOs publicly. And I think the difference now is that because 2020 has been a crazy overall year, I believe it's like a year of awakening for those who are non-believers. Now, not everyone, but I feel like a lot of more people are open to accepting that we're not alone. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I wanted to look into another political person who's openly talked about it, and this is Canada's former defense minister, Paul Hellyer. Hellyer? It's Hellyer. Mm-hmm. So he has publicly stated that multiple alien species, 4 to be exact, had visited, and they are also living amongst us. But he also said something that Mr. Haim had said as well, and that was that they have also worked with the United States. So that seems to be like the key thing that people keep saying.
Right.
Is that so I don't know if they just think the U.S. is like the go-to people. Have you heard of the Canada's former defense minister?
I remember hearing about it a little bit, yeah. So I remember bits and pieces. So that's interesting. Did that resurface recently with this story?
No, that was just me looking it up.
Okay.
So when I looked him up, because I know for a fact you and I have talked about it, and I'm so open to the idea that we're not alone.
Right.
I had heard that other politicians were openly talking about it, even though they were retired. And remember I told you I spoke to patients of mine who were pilots, and I would ask, right. Did you ever see anything? And they would all say yes. Like not one said no, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So I, in doing research for this, went back and looked up these people. So I'm sure just like people who maybe are looking into it, probably this popped up. But the things I found, like he was talking about this in 2008. Another government official who was also, he actually was filmed discussing UFOs was Dmitry Medvedev.
Yes.
Medvedev, who was the president or prime minister of Russia from 2008 to 2012.
Yeah.
Which at the time, the video is from 2012, it went viral. But again, no one really picked up on it. And those people who read it, the articles were almost like he was joking, that ha ha ha. So basically, it's in Russian. So he was asked by a reporter if he, what about alien life and being visited. So this is kind of like a loose translation of what he said. He said that the president gets a suitcase of folders that are top secret, one being like nuclear stuff, and the other about the aliens who have visited our planets. And that the report is provided by the Special Service of Russia, which handles the control of the aliens in our country, meaning Russia, right?
Right.
And then these folders are transferred from president to president. Then the reporter asked, well, how many are living amongst us? And he basically said, how many of them live among us? I cannot tell because panic would begin. And that was like the end of the interview. So that video is also online if you guys want to see it. And that was from 2012. So I just find that interesting.
Yeah. It's crazy. This is the part that stood out to me, is that Haim Eshed, he's of course Israel's space security head of security programs, right, for the last like 30 years, right?
Was, yeah.
So he's a reputable guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm assuming that this guy's reputable. Like, Israel's a country where they don't mess around. Like, they do not mess around. They don't. Our country, like, we'll hire any dumbass to do any job, right? I mean, just look at who's in charge, I mean,
mm-hmm.
But in their country, they don't mess around. So the fact that this guy has a career, a reputable career in that security, top security, credentials and all that, And he comes out and says this. I thought, well, shit, well, okay, this is interesting. I don't know what the guy's current story status is. Is he lost his mind? Did he get drugged with LSD and he's now just claiming he sees it? Is he legit? Is he, I don't know where he's currently at with this, his state of mind or his retirement or his life or whatever he's doing. But one thing that he pointed out was that after claiming that aliens exist, that Israel and the U.S. have long been in contact with them, and that Donald Trump was going to talk about it, but the extraterrestrial beings of the Galactic Federation stopped him.
Yeah.
So 2 things about that stand out to me. One, we have a president that will not shut up. Like he's like, he gives 0 fucks about anybody, anything, right? He don't care. So why would they let him in, of all people, right, in the government? Him of all people, why would they let him in on this secret, right? And 2, how did this Galactic Federation get to him, considering that he's surrounded by Secret Service all the time? Like, did he agree to go to a meeting, a location somewhere? Did they sit down and talk? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
there's just so much. I mean, I'm gonna say that this guy's legit. This Haim Eshed. So what he's saying is legit and it's true, and this story is true, and it's just kind of like, well, if we truly know, it's just so weird that you would trust, or they would trust the one person not to be trusted because, he's of the state of mind where he doesn't care. But it's so weird. If it's true, then this is the one thing he does care about and is holding that secret to, possibly his grave,
Yeah. Yeah. And as other, there's footage of Obama talking about that as well. There's JFK in one of his speeches mentions that. So I believe they've all known about it. We've talked about Project Blue Book. In the last episode, we also talked about all the declassified stuff. The governments are literally telling us, but nobody wants to fucking believe it, right?
Right.
Because y'all stupid. Sorry.
Yeah.
But, it's definitely, they're being more transparent about it now. By the way, I was joking about that if you guys don't believe in it.
That's funny. Nah, she's being serious. Mary hates them all. Yeah.
So 2020, again, they have been talking about it openly. Even the Japanese minister talked about it openly this year. The other thing is that the New York Times had reported that the Pentagon's project to investigate like UFOs, it was canceled in 2012. But the Pentagon actually said that they are still investigating these, but they're just, it's part of the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force of the Office Naval of Intelligence. So they're still doing it. So they didn't say, no, we're not. They didn't sugarcoat it and say, we can't discuss that. They said, no, we do have a task force and this is what it's called. So they're being a lot more open about it. And so I know that when like Tom DeLonge was on, what was it? The podcast, Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
He said that this would be the strategy is of all governments. Now we're just not talking about the US, right? Was to slowly start talking about it, so that there is no mass panic. And I feel like it's there in front of us. If you guys Google all these things, it's there, but a lot of people don't want to think about this being a reality. And so it's almost like, that's why I was saying, I feel like 2020 is a year of awakening for those people who didn't believe, but because of all the shit that's happened this year, maybe it's like, okay, I'm open to the possibility that this is true, so someone also suggested, and this is far-fetched and I'm not going to get into this, but that what if COVID is one of their experiments?
I mean,
it changes the RNA.
I mean, it's not far-fetched. It's not far-fetched because it's not far-fetched because look, when COVID started, what was the diagnosis for COVID? It was what was it? Bilateral pneumonia, right? when they started tagging those cases in China, pneumonia, right? I'm like, okay, well, that's a flu outbreak. And then all of a sudden it's like, no, this is a novel virus. And then they found out it's coronavirus. Okay, then they finally called it COVID-19, right? Whatever, right? But it's not so much COVID-19, right? Because let's say somebody made COVID-19. The best you could expect is pneumonia as the end game, right? But then now we found a bunch of treatment that we can beat it, right? We can lessen the symptoms and, use this drug, use that drug, combination, and vitamin infusion, this and this, whatever. Maybe patients don't end up on ventilators, right? Like they did back in February, March, But then now, what's happening to these patients? Now there's a whole hell of a lot of symptoms that are neurological, like brain fog, heart disease, stroke.
Yeah.
Like, how do you engineer a virus to do all that?
Exactly.
So
for those of you guys, yes, I was going to say, so for those of you guys, just to kind of, so what it is that we all think of COVID, like once we're over COVID, we've survived COVID.
Right.
But it changes your body so much that you are having long-term effects. So essentially COVID-19 is a pre-existing condition now.
Yes.
And so depending on how, yes, we're treating it, but we're not beating it. And so this is where I stay away from the naysayers, because you survived it. You know what I mean? You're fine. But guess what? Your fucking blood is coagulating different now.
Yes.
Meaning that if you had COVID, there is a higher risk. I'm not saying likelihood that you may collapse and die.
Yeah.
Or if you had COVID 8 months from now, you may die from something else.
Right.
So that's what the scientists are trying to understand. And so that when I say naysayers, I mean those people that are like, I survived it, I'm fine, my symptoms were mild, or I had no symptoms. I'm telling you as a clinician, it's too early because we're seeing people my age. I'm 37.
Yep.
People my age coming back months later having strokes who collapse out of nowhere because it's changing the way our body, mostly the cardiac. There is neurological stuff, but mostly cardiac is what we're seeing.
Right.
So that's a whole nother episode. But someone had suggested, well, and again, I think it's because it's 2020, right? That everyone's open to these thoughts, right?
Right.
Well, what if this is the experiment? One of the experiments. Hey, it could be.
I would not be surprised because of like you mentioned the after effects. But just because of that alone, I would not be surprised. Because now there could be even a bigger conspiracy story tied to this, where the president going on a rampage for the last 7-8 months of saying, oh, it's fake, it's not real, it's just a little flu, right? By doing that, you cause uncertainty, right? So people that follow him want to believe that, oh, it's not fake, it's fake, it's not, the virus is not real, I don't have to wear a mask, right? So now you have two sides that are fighting, right? People that believe the virus is real, people that do not believe the virus is real. All the while, hey, there's a UFO story here.
Yeah.
And then if you toss in the UFO story and say, hey, aliens are real, then what do we say? Yeah, whatever. Fake news.
Yep. Which is fine. They can stay on the fake news section. Wouldn't that
be funny,
I'll be like, beam me up, guys. I really think that's what it is. It's almost like to take people away from what's really important.
Yeah, it was like fake news was generated just to cover this up,
Maybe.
Because there's one thing that Tom DeLonge hinted at, and I'm so eager to ask him this specific question off the mic because I know what the answer is, because he hinted at it on Joe Rogan's podcast. He said, I already discussed this, but you're going to have to find, he says, I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I was told not to, but you can find it because I already mentioned it in previous interviews. And I'm pretty sure it has to do with the fact that when he discovered, this is what he said, he discovered something that left him sleepless for like months. He's like, I couldn't sleep because it changed everything I believed in. Now, I think it has to do with religion.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's possible something that he got shown or told some credible evidence, basically negating God, saying God does not exist. And these are the people who created you, and this is the reason why,
That's what you think?
He hinted at that. And I'm like, you know what? The world is not ready for that. No. Because remember, you still have people that believe in Christianity, in Islam, Judaism, and they go back, those beliefs go back to, the Old Testament,
Yeah.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and earth,
Mm-hmm. So no, I believe in God, but I don't. What God is to me is kind of like a higher being.
Right.
What that is, I don't know, but because I believe in the fact that we're not alone, I also realize that a lot of religions have the same stories in their scriptures.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of overlap.
A lot of overlap, and a lot of the stories, so yes, they could have all been seeing the same thing, which could have been aliens coming out here, right? But they all saw them as gods. Like, who are these beings coming down from the skies?
Right.
And then that's, the birth of religion, and you see it in, Japanese, Catholic, all these scriptures of every religion they have, even like, the whole Noah story. They all have this story of the rain deluge, like where it rained. All religions have that story, not with Noah, but the fact that it rained so much and the entire world was like covered in water. So I believe it. I believe if that is what he hinted at, I would not be at all surprised. At all.
Because that changes everything.
Yeah, because people are hating each other.
And then if now tomorrow you say, hey, Islam means nothing, Judaism means nothing, Christianity means nothing, then you start to question, why am I here? Who put me here? Why am I here?
Yeah. And
now either you're going to hate your neighbor even more and chaos will ensue, or do you embrace it? Does the world finally come together and say, okay, we really don't know what's going on, and we were put here by some advanced race who were made either genetically or whatever, and we should actually figure this out together. And maybe that's what brings world peace, or that's what divides us even further, because then you have people that are saying, well, aliens killed God, and they don't want that,
No, I don't think people are going to be accepting. I think the only way people would be accepting is if aliens actually came here. You know what I mean? And we're all scared shitless and we're all the same at that point.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the only way, because, I've mentioned this before. The reason, I grew up Catholic and I saw firsthand, this is my opinion. I don't think that I'm a less of a better person than anyone who's very religious. I just felt like a lot of the world problems start because of religion. So it's not that I don't believe in religion. I just choose to be a good person myself. And I respect everyone and their religious backgrounds, right? So I don't know. I know that a lot of people are very close-minded and they would be furious if you even suggested that. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I feel like the only way we would all get to acceptance is if the aliens came and were like, straight up, like all of us at that point being scared shitless all together would be like, okay,
Yeah.
But going back to, our Space Force, they have a Twitter account. And as also when this story broke, the United States military branch, I guess I want to say Mike Pence is kind of like really overseeing it, but they renamed 2 Florida bases this week, which was the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida, and also the Patrick Air Force Base. Now they are known as the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station and the Patrick Space Force Station or base.
Wait,
so that was this week they were legally renamed.
So am I mistaken, or the Cape, wasn't that Kennedy Space Center?
I don't know.
Because that would kind of blow if you take away Kennedy's name off that to rename it.
Yeah, so I don't know. I just saw that it was called Cape Canaveral Air Force Station.
Because I think I think it's Kennedy Space Center. Then you have Johnson Space Center in Texas, in Houston.
Yeah, so, I didn't see his name on the article, so I don't know.
And then, of course, that would be a stupid political move if they did that, because obviously, you know, but...
Yeah, I don't think they would do that.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, so essentially we have 2 Space Force Station bases in Florida, which is where Boeing, SpaceX, usually a lot of, I would say, 95% of the shuttles are launched out there.
Oh, yeah, pretty much all manned, unmanned rockets, except for military. Some of the military stuff goes out of Vandenberg here in California, up north. But most of all of NASA and SpaceX usually gets launched from Florida, usually.
Yeah, and my landlord is a Boeing engineer who basically goes out there for months on end, Florida. So I always want to ask him questions, but I don't want to get him in trouble.
You could ask.
So when I see him here, like I'm always like, oh, I should ask him about that, but
you should.
Then I'm like, no. You think I should?
Yeah,
because he engineers the rockets, and so he'll go to Florida for months on end. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can talk about. The stuff he can, trust me, he will not talk about. I mean,
yeah,
there's stuff that I still can't talk about, because when I worked at JPL, I had security clearance. Mm-hmm. So there's stuff that I still can't talk about. But, you know, people ask me, how do we get to Mars? And I can say, well, we use this, we use that. You know, it took 9 months. We got there, and no problem, you know.
Yeah.
But for security reasons, trust me, he will not tell you, you know, everything.
What he can't say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things where you're like, you're just like swearing a note, you know. It's like, you know, it's kind of like taking the Hippocratic Oath, you know, in medicine, you know. It's like that serious that these engineers take it, you know.
Yeah. My friend's dad is retired. He worked at Boeing, and he was like really high up. I asked him, not the dad, I asked my friend, and he said he never really talked about any of that stuff. So I do inquire here and there.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna try, every time I see him, I might ask him. I don't know.
You should. You'd be like, hey, I'm always fascinated because
I'm like, so has your dad told you anything yet?
Yeah, but you know,
he's probably like weirdo.
No, but see, sometimes they don't talk to, like sometimes they don't talk to family. You know, mm-hmm. Like I'll give you a perfect example. My dad was a World War II, Vietnam, and Korea War veteran. Okay, mm-hmm. Never liked to talk about the war here at home.
Yeah,
but my friends would come over. And he would talk about everything. He'd talk about the Japanese, you know, and how bad the war was, and dropping the bomb, and, you know, nuclear this and this. And I was like, God damn, I never heard of that story before, you know?
Yeah.
But it's just something about he was conditioned to not bring it home, you know?
Oh, gotcha.
But sometimes, like, if you were to ask, you know, you probably would get some pretty cool stories.
Yeah. That I want to hear cool stories. If any of you guys, any of you listeners out there have any stories, hit us up. Like,
yeah, there's a lot. I mean, there's so much going on in technology right now, you know, in the space frontier that it's, you know, before we would be like, oh, we're thinking about going to Mars by 2010. So, you know, we're waiting 20 years, right, to get there, right? Mm-hmm. Now it's like, hey, we're going to Mars in 3 years. And in the span of 3 years, it's like, hey, UFOs exist. Hey, aliens are hiding on Mars or here on Earth, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, so it's like these stories are breaking like so constant now that I hope that however these stories and things are coming out or being leaked, that it's legit. And it's just a way for them to say, hey, we're slowly giving you small pieces of the pie so that we don't shock you at one time, you know?
Yeah. Which I think is what they're doing. Because if you guys just Google the Pentagon and the UFOs, the information from this year, you'll see that they have been slowly, at least our government, right?
Yeah.
But you know, a lot of shit happened this year. So a lot of people weren't paying attention.
Yeah.
So go ahead, and if you need some time to Google All of it is there, and it's proven now, at least, that they are out of this world, machinery that you see flying. Because they won't say aliens. The government won't say that. They'll just say, yes, that is footage of an unidentified flying object that we don't know where it's from.
Right.
But they won't, they know more than they're leading on, obviously.
Right.
So I guess we'll see what happens in the next 10 years, Leonie.
10? I want to give you 10 weeks.
You think?
Yeah. Think about it. If there's not so much UFO, if there's some kind of alien civilization hiding here, they gotta look like us.
Yeah. Because actually you have a good point. Because the Israeli defense guy said that. So did the Canadian, and then the Russian guy said it, among us.
That means they look like us. They're hiding among us in plain sight.
Do you believe in the reptilians?
I find it fascinating. If it's true, that's pretty damn crazy. I never fully bought into it, but I think the possibility is there,
Yeah. So for those of you who haven't heard of them, so essentially it's always been seen as a conspiracy where they look just like us, but like on video you might see someone's eye move like a reptile. So there, I know a lot of people are probably talking about it more now. But I just want to say that, everyone should really just be open-minded. Like, a lot of this stuff has been talked about generation after generation after generation, and somehow we were conditioned because all governments around the world would dispel all this, right?
Right.
To believe that you're fucking crazy, right? Because all of these spaceships, like Area 51, right, they were all balloons. When newspapers had already published what it was, and then like 2 days later, even the government had, and then 2 days later it was a fucking weather balloon.
Right.
Which, come on, U.S. government is so stupid with that lie.
Yeah.
But what I'm getting at is that I feel like maybe it is out of control of Earth now. And that's why governments are no longer withholding it and slowly easing the public into it.
They probably,
because they know something's coming.
But yeah, because, okay, so imagine this. Let's go back to the December 2019 when the whole Tic Tac UFO story broke, right? Think about that. If you were to see the Tic Tac video and the description of what these pilots saw, one of the things that I took out of that is almost exactly what I heard a couple people say, and it was that. Oh, okay. Before I share my thoughts, I want to tell you this thing defies the laws of physics. Okay, so everything in textbook physics that we know is going to change if this thing is real. If we're able to reconstruct it or rebuild it or reverse engineer it, whatever, because we're talking about going from 80,000 feet to sea level or under the water in less than a second,
mm-hmm.
or just hovering there, not moving, and then just disappearing, like just going 80,000 miles an hour to the left, to the right, whatever, impossible. And then you could say, well, it's we don't know who owns that technology, right? So to me, it's super scary if it is human technology, because that means that either our government owns it and is trying to counteract the nuclear threat of all the other nations, right? And say, hey, we got a weapon that can get to right on top of your house in 10 seconds, and you're done, you're dead, Or it's not ours. It's truly extraterrestrial technology, right? Alien technology. And that's even more scarier, because then it's like, well, we can't stop them at all. They can do anything they want to us. And they just proved it to us, in those videos, the Tic Tac videos,
Yeah.
So that's really scary when you think about it, because then that shows who's really in control. And my question is that the point? The point of showing up is, are they trying to tell us, hey, we're going to meet with you soon, but here's what we can do. You fuck with us, we'll kill all of you, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe is that what's been going on? Like, by showing us their technology, then, you know, we can't do nothing. We all we can do is look and say, wow, that's insane. And they say, yep, that's right. We can destroy you if we want to, but we want to talk to who's in charge in this little continent, that little continent, that little continent, and say, hey, you know, we want this and we'll give you this, or whatever their deals are making, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just insane. It's insane to think about it, because part of me feels like there's something real that's going on that, you know, and who knows, like, where's this going to lead us, you know? Like, wouldn't it be crazy if tomorrow they just showed up and they gave us the tools to say, hey, here you are, free, unlimited power, clean water, energy for the rest of your lives. You don't need to, you know, do anything. Everybody gets it for free. You know, cars are obsolete. You can now fly. You can disappear, reappear, you know. I mean, it changes everything, right?
Yeah.
Crazy thoughts, but
I don't think it's far-fetched, though. I mean,
right.
I think, obviously a lot of people, you know, when this went public, a lot of people were not so skeptical. You know, they were like, well, I'm not surprised, or I wouldn't put it past anyone at this point. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I do know that more people are more open to it. And I think that's a good thing. But you know how the internet is.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of memes that were out there, which really made me laugh.
Right.
So I think that definitely we should get prepared. And, you know, we discussed, you know, the fact that we have a space force, you know what I mean? And I told you in the first episode we did on UFOs, that to me, that was an admission from Trump. Even though he didn't straight up say it, I was like, I knew it. Like, that is an admission. But I wanted to leave everyone with the commercial that the Air Force, would you say it's a commercial?
Yes.
That not Air Force, I just called them Air Force, that the Space Force has. And so I thought it was very interesting. One bit that they basically say is that in this ad, it says, we will fight in an environment with no up or down, no left or right, where there are no borders and nowhere to hide. Our Space Force is defending our country here on Earth and wherever our mission takes us. I just thought that was just interesting. And nowhere to hide. So I don't know what battle they're looking forward to or what's going on over there. But if you guys listen to the ad, it's just, you know, it's like any military thing. You know, obviously there's some like Hollywood like voice and, you know,
right.
It is just like I'm sure the ads for the Navy, the Air Force, are all very similar because the United States is known for that. But I was just like, you know, what wars are we going to fight up there? Like, that was my thought.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm probably overanalyzing it.
But yeah, it's going back to like May when the president gave his quote. He said, space is going to be the future, both in terms of defense and offense. We're now the leader on space. And that's when he presented the official flag of the Space Force military branch. So yeah, his quotes and the marketing material that, you know, on that commercial that you're talking about, that clip, I mean, it's interesting what they're alluding to. And it's like, what do you mean you can't hide? Like what are we, you're right, Mary. It's like, what are we looking for? Who, you know, like, what's the point?
Yeah. So there, you know, I think this is just the first few steps for our government in the United States. I'm sure, you know, like I said, this is across the world. Every government, you know, the UK, they all have files on all this stuff. So we're just talking about the US as far as what we know. But, you know, like I said, we discussed a few countries where their government officials have openly talked about it. So, yeah, something's brewing. And, you know, remember in the time of Area 51, right? Where it was like, no, this isn't real, right? Now governments are like openly saying, yeah, there is stuff from out of this world, but they don't, that's as far as we get them to talk. But I just find that interesting.
Yeah.
So thank you, Leonie, for another episode.
This was fun.
Yeah, I know. We hit a lot of, it's crazy because we hit a lot of subjects just off of this. It was like the tree branch, right? And then we hit COVID, we hit religion, we hit this.
Yeah.
I loved it. But yeah, I do want to share that commercial with everyone. Just listen to it. It doesn't necessarily mean anything, but being us and curious minds is like, well, what do they really mean?
So listen for that clip at the end of this episode.
But yes, so you'll join me next time?
Yes, I am here.
Awesome. So join us next time, everyone. Bye.
Today, space is essential not only to our way of life, it's absolutely critical to the modern way of war. GPS, ATMs, cell phones, gas pumps, traffic lights, power grids, guided missiles, surveillance, RPAs, ground combat control. There's no such thing as a day without space operations. You just don't see them. Earth is only half the battle. Cyber attacks and jamming of our satellites. Microsatellites that can create a debris field. At 17,000 miles an hour, a piece of metal the size of a coin can be weaponized. Now is the time for a military branch with a clear and singular focus on space. A military branch that protects the hopes and dreams of America and our way of life as the space domain becomes more and more contested. It's time for another giant leap. The United States Space Force is being built from the brightest minds across the space operations of the Air Force, our joint services, and the private sector. We aren't just getting ready for the near future, we're getting ready for the 22nd century. When our enemies ask, what if? We will have an answer. When foreign powers can build bases on the dark side of the moon, when private companies are inventing a new economy beyond our planet, we need to stay one step ahead of the future. And the future is where we'll make history. We will fight in an environment with no up or down, no left or right, where there are no borders and nowhere to hide. Our Space Force is defending our country, here on Earth and wherever our mission takes us. As commerce and exploration expand, we will imagine the unimaginable, anticipate the inconceivable, and prepare for the impossible. We won't just think outside the box. We'll think outside the atmosphere, in one of the most challenging environments ever known.
That was episode 42 of the Purposely Curious podcast. Make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on most podcast platforms. And follow us on social media at Purposely Curious on Instagram and at Purposely C Pod on Twitter. That's Purposely, the letter C, Pod. Until next time, you know what to do.